I press record.
We're starting. Perfect. Okay, everyone. And I want to welcome all of you to this information session where we're going to hear about the latest and greatest news with the college admissions and applications. I sincerely hope there are quite a few 9th and 10th graders. If you're able to actually type into the chat box, I'm going to write hello. I want all of you to see. If you could just kind of write what grades you're in, and Mr. Michael Courtney is also able to see that as well. So if you're able to just kind of share what grades you're in so we can get a feel. It's really important that you know the following. Michael Courtney served as a National Association member for colleges. I want to say 10 years, more than 10 years, 15, am I right?
16 years. 16
years. He's currently a full-time college counselor at SAR High School, located in the Bronx. He is a member of the Association for College. He was a former assistant to the director of admissions at New York University. I just want to make sure I'm going through all your credentials. Am I missing anything? He's regularly someone who speaks, consults, and informs families about the latest changes and admissions. So I'm really honored to say thank you so much for co-hosting this and just for being someone who's able to share this wealth of information that you have in such a clear and transparent way with all the families. And Mr. Courtney's asked if he could see you guys on the video, which is great. And you can also type into the chat. I just want to make sure that Mr. Courtney sees everything on the chat box. Are we correct?
Yeah, and you're welcome to either privately chat a question if you're too shy in public, or publicly chat it to everyone.
Yeah, so you're able to include any of your questions, and I'll type that in, and you can write any questions that you have here, but we might hold off on answering them until towards the later half of this webinar today. And just thank you to all of you for participating. All right, let's begin.
All right, so there's more people in the waiting room. I was just letting people in here.
Oh, sure. We could do that on our end so that you could have a smooth presentation.
Okay,
we'll do the admin.
Good evening. My name is Michael Courtney, and to any of you that are essential workers, thank you so much for all of your hard work the past few months, and hope you and your families are healthy and safe. And to everyone, whether you are an essential worker or not, keep being brave and keep hanging in there. We know it's been a rough few months, and hopefully your families are okay. So my name is Michael Courtney, and I come to you from South Florida, actually. Francis, fun fact, we went back to Florida last week. I grew up in Florida, so did my wife, and we thought, let's go to a house with a pool at my parents' instead of being in New York City. So I miss New York in a way, but I really don't. So it's like in between. I went to NYU with Francis back in 2000 through 2004, and then I worked in admissions as an assistant director of admissions, and I worked specifically with their College of Arts and Science and Stern School of Business committees. And then in my third year there, a lot of people were going from the college side to the high school side. I thought, let's give it a try. So I've been at SAR High School since 2007. So wrapping up my 13th year there, and working on the high school side is incredible. So it's nice to meet freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and helping them through the admission process and their parents. And it's something I've been doing for a long time. I feel very passionate about. So I'm going to talk to you guys about things to look for as you are searching colleges. And then we will talk about admission process and what do schools look for. And we could talk about some of the changes in admission as a result of COVID-19 and the impacts for the future. So I'm going to ask questions, and if people want to answer them, they are welcome to just shout them out or type them in the box to make this a little interactive. So first thing to think about when you are looking into a college is a college a good match for you? And how do you know if a college is a good match for you? There's more than one school that's out there for everyone. So anyone who says, I didn't get into my dream school, life is over, they have other issues. There's more than one college for every single person here. So you want to think about what are the lists of schools that would make sense based on the things that you're interested in. So the first thing to think about is size. Are you looking for a school that is in the smaller side, which is usually under 5,000 undergrads, something in the medium size, 5 to 10,000 undergrads, or in the large size, 10,000 or above? Who could tell me an example of a smaller school? Anyone want to call out or type it in? Otherwise, it's just me talking, which is fine for me. Bowdoin, excellent. Colby, great. So those small liberal arts colleges, right? You think about Amherst and Williams and Bowdoin and Swarthmore and Bates and Colby and Middlebury, and I can go on and on. Those are examples of smaller schools. And schools that are small, Caltech, Cooper Union, this is great, Babson. Schools that are smaller have certain advantages. Who could share what they think an advantage is to a smaller school? Either call it out or type it in. Intimacy, attention, right? If you're in a small liberal arts college or a small research university of under 5,000, you might recognize more people on campus. You might be more of a name than a number to professors. Class sizes could be smaller. You might have smaller classes right away freshman year, not just waiting until you're developed into your major. There's more of an emphasis on undergrad education, absolutely right. So sometimes the larger schools might have faculty that are in name and sound amazing, but they're only really teaching graduate students. So a lot of advantages to undergraduates that are smaller sized. Larger size usually is over 10,000, typically a lot of public institutions and some privates also. Who can give me examples of larger institutions? NYU, UCLA, excellent. Cornell, a lot of state schools, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, Maryland, Rutgers, UVA. These are all larger universities. So who could tell me some advantages to larger universities? Boston University, good. What's so good about a really large school? All right, unlimited resources, right? A lot of opportunities for students, maybe because there's such a plethora of majors. More diversity, right? Could attract more people from around the world. Very strong alumni network. This is great. More people to learn from. Excellent. Okay. So very large universities will have a lot of advantages, even though it might not feel as intimate as a small liberal arts college. Other advantages as well. Schools that are in the middle. What are examples of some schools that are in the middle? So I'll give you a few: Emory University, Washington University, and St. Louis. The schools that are medium size kind of has the best of both worlds. So the nice thing to know is that there is not really just one college for everyone, but if you know you're looking for a smaller school, there's a whole list of schools that are smaller. Looking for a larger school, again, a whole list of schools that are larger, and also all those in between. So the nice thing to know when it comes to colleges in America, there are a few thousand colleges. There are maybe 50 of them that are in the media, right? It seems like those are the ones that get the most attention. And it's important to know that you could do really well wherever you go. And it's not just one named school. It's going to get you into the grad school of your dreams or that job of your dreams. Now, that being said, there are a lot of competitive schools out there where admissions is pretty highly selective. And I'll go over with you a number of the things that we have to think about for admission to those schools. So criteria of what you're looking for in a college, one is size. Another thing to think about is location. So you might look at a school that's more remote, in a more rural setting, maybe a school that's more urban in a more city-like setting, or something like a suburb, which could be its own campus scene, but outside of a major city. So who can give me an example of a school that's a bit more remote? I see Middlebury from a previous answer, so I'll give you that. Emory's in Atlanta. I'd say it's a little bit more of a suburban setting within Atlanta. It's in Buckhead, a neighborhood within Atlanta. Cornell. Cornell is a really good example. Stony Brook and Long Island's good. So a remote setting, you have the campus really is the scene, right? You're not leaving campus much to go to different places because there's a lot to do on campus as if it's its own entity. So Cornell is in the city of Ithaca. There's some stuff going on in Ithaca, but Cornell really is its own world, its own network. A school that's more urban, what are examples of those? You guys know this one. Baruch, Columbia, NYU, good, BU in Boston, GW in Washington, D.C., Drexel in Philadelphia, the schools that are very enmeshed within city streets, UPenn, another example. And an urban school has that hyperstimulation of a city alongside its own college campus. Now, if you were to go visit NYU, there are no gates that separate NYU from the rest of Greenwich Village. It's enmeshed within the scene. So it's important to know, sorry, I have a visitor. No, you can't switch chairs, buddy. This is my son, Moses. Moses, say hi. Who wants to switch chairs, but I'm pretty comfortable, so I'm not going to switch. So a school that's more urban, you're going to have a lot of opportunities on the campus, but also if you want to go see a Broadway show, you want to go to a really new chic restaurant, you want to go to museums, that's a big part of what the campus culture is like. Who could tell me examples of suburban schools, schools that are its own campus, but really outside of a major city? Brandeis, excellent example. Good, Emory. Any others? Haverford, right outside of Philadelphia, Texas A&M. So the idea is that you have these schools that are outside of a major city. I would say Binghamton might feel a little more remote because it's 2.5 hours away from Manhattan, a little over an hour from Syracuse. But schools that usually are 30, 40 minutes outside of a major city so that you could be on campus most of the time. But if you're a Brandeis student who Saturday night wants to go into Boston to experience the culture of the city, it's not that difficult. It's pretty common. Or if you want to get an internship once a week, that's more common. So whereas the Baruch student might intern 3 days a week and manage that alongside a full curriculum, a student in a more suburban campus like Haverford might go into Philly maybe once a week because they really have a campus environment as a more permanent 4-day-a-week phenomenon. So I have students in my school where I work who are happy to be anywhere. They can figure it out if it's rural, urban, or suburban, or they can figure it out small, medium, large. But some kids know that they feed off the energy of a city and they only want urban. Or some kids might want to be on that campus on a hill far away from civilization and let that be their playground for 4 years. Then you have kids who are in between. So location is an important thing to think about when looking in campuses. The most important reason to look into colleges is academics. Okay, so you're paying tuition for a strong education. Everything else is icing on the cake, the housing, the student organizations, the location. The most important reason that you guys are going to school is for an education. So if you are interested in a certain school, you have to make sure they have the major that you're interested in. So when I used to work in admissions at NYU, I can't tell you how many people had said to me, I want to go to NYU to study fashion. I said, sorry, we don't offer fashion. And that's it. There goes our college search for NYU. And it's better to do that research to find out. Cooper Union is only known for art, architecture, and engineering. So when a student of mine said they want to study creative writing at Cooper Union, I'm like, that's really cute. Maybe you could take one class, but you're not studying it as a major. So it's important to think about the school that you're interested in applying to if they have your program. So for example, engineering isn't offered in a lot of schools. Business isn't offered in a lot of schools, but maybe economics as a theory-based major is. So these are types of things to think about when looking into your colleges. Do they have the academic program that's going to satisfy your interests? A lot of students are undecided, and that's totally fine. But the thing to know is that if you have multiple interests, there are a few different things you want to study, it's good to see if the schools that you're interested in have interesting classes on their course catalogs, or they have professors who are pretty intriguing with the research they've done. I'll tell you something interesting. A lot of colleges will say you could be undecided on an application. It's their most popular major. I would tell you that undecided is boring. It doesn't add any color to your story. But you have to be careful with a major that you're going to list. If you are going to be, for example, male listing economics or computer science, you are a dime a dozen. It's not unique, right? Or if you are someone who is looking for a major, let's say classics, is a more underserved major. There aren't that many classics majors. But if you put that down, they're looking to see, have you studied Greek or Latin or ancient history? That it makes sense that you'd be interested in the classics major. So they do sometimes look for a tie-in to that major. So when it comes to doing research on colleges, it is very helpful to visit schools. I know now it's impossible to visit schools. A lot of these campuses will have virtual tours on their admission websites. So let's say you mentioned here Haverford. You can Google Haverford College virtual tour on Google, and you'll see a whole list of options. Anything that is offered within the Haverford admission page, you should look at that because that's the most professional looking virtual tour. Otherwise, you might see a random hour-long tour on YouTube that a random student put together. Anything that's official will be the way to visit it. When it comes to visiting campuses, you could do it virtually. It could be the rep will come visit your school in the future. That's helpful also. Or you might have a college night, a college fair of some kind. And then you can also sign up to be on an inquiry list for any college of interest. This is especially helpful for schools that track demonstrated interest. That's a phrase you might hear a lot in the next few years. Demonstrated interest means that you've done your research on the school and they feel like if admitted, you have a chance of going there. Colleges don't want to, quote, waste an acceptance on someone who has no interest in going there. So the way they know if you're interested is if you've done an info session or campus tour, if you've attended an off-campus reception once those happen again, if you're on their mailing list, which you can join any admission website tonight, their mailing list. So when this is over, if you have 5 schools of interest, go join their mailing list. If you read their emails, a school like University of Michigan actually tracks if you're opening their emails. And if there are links in the emails, how long you're spending on those links. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. If you get emails from schools that you don't care about, unsubscribe, don't worry about it. but any schools that you are interested in, it's a good idea to stay on that mailing list and to read the emails being sent to you. Any questions about anything so far when it comes to researching colleges and demonstrating interest? So far, so good? Okay, so let's talk about what do you think colleges are looking for in this admission process? So the first thing that schools look for is the transcript. This is your most important document. The transcript is a document that reflects your 4 years of courses and your 3 years of final grades. I'm seeing questions now, I'll get to these in just a second. So when it comes to the transcript, colleges are looking at your school, what your offerings are within your school, and how you're maximizing those offerings. So if you're applying to a most selective university, let's say University of Pennsylvania, if your high school offers many APs and you chose to take one, that's not going to help you because it doesn't look like you're maximizing the curriculum. So the idea is that colleges that are more selective are looking to see what your school's curricular offerings are on the higher end, whether it's advanced placement or international baccalaureate or dual enrolled classes, or maybe schools don't offer any of those and the top classes are just called honors. We're looking to see how you're maximizing those. They like to see 4 years of English, history, math, science, foreign language. Those are called the academic majors. Those are the subjects that they care about the most. So it's very nice if you did well in phys ed or journalism or art, music. They're not going to prioritize that the way they would English, history, math, science, foreign language. That being said, don't get bad grades in those courses. That doesn't look good either. But you should know that the 5 academic majors are what they're really focusing on. If you're applying for engineering schools, they're looking very closely at your math science transcript. And if you're in the highest level, math science classes taking up to AP Calc. If you are thinking of business, so looking at your math side of the transcript very closely. So the transcript is a collection of your courses and your grades. The most competitive schools are looking for as many A's as possible. It's just a reality of what their pools look like, but they also look at trends. Maybe you had a B+ freshman year, everything else is A's, you went up in trend. Those are things that they note. Colleges are also looking at you in the context of the pool. So if a school gets 20 applications from your high school, they're comparing you to those other 19 along with you in the region, because every admissions office has a territory representative who reads for their region. And then they're looking at that within the context of the greater application pool. So colleges look at 3 years of grades. If you apply anywhere early decision or early action, I'll get into that in a minute what that means, then they could ask for first quarter grades, how you're doing the first couple months. Otherwise, all regular decision applications will see your first semester grades. And then wherever you matriculate, we'll see your final transcript. So that's what transcript means. That's the first thing colleges look at. And I'm going to answer questions in the chat in a minute. I want to go over some of these deadlines. I mentioned early decision, early action, and this is very important to know. Who could tell me what early decision is? Feel free to shout it out, unmute yourself. Okay, so you apply by November, right? It's typically November 1st, November 15th. It is binding if you get in, correct. That means if offered admission, you're gonna go there. So early decision is for a family who knows that they've done the research on a school and this is their absolute first choice. If admitted, they know they wanna go there. So early decision is mostly private schools. Name a private school, most likely to have early decision: NYU, Emory, WashU, Cornell, University of Pennsylvania, Brown. Good question about financial aid. I'll get to that in a second. Early decision means that if admitted, you're going to withdraw any other applications you have sent out or that are pending. Okay, so early decision, you apply by November 1st. You find out mid-December on or about the 15th. And if admitted, you're done with the admission process. There's another deadline called Early Decision 2. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. Early Decision 2 is a January 1st deadline for students who maybe didn't get in elsewhere, Early Decision 1, or who just weren't ready to commit by November 1st. Maybe they needed to take a December SAT or ACT. And Early Decision 2 finds out early to mid-February. And instead of finding out late March, you find out earlier in a smaller applicant pool. So regular decision deadlines are oftentimes the same as Early Decision 2. It's usually January 1st, January 15th, but you find out earlier and you're being read in a much smaller applicant pool. Not every private school will have Early Decision 2. Examples are University of Chicago, Emory, WashU, BU, NYU, Brandeis, Tufts, Vanderbilt. A lot of liberal arts colleges will have ED2. None of the Ivy Leagues have ED2. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to answer questions in the chat. These are great questions. In addition to early decision 1 and early decision 2, there's something called early action. Who here knows what that is? Okay, so early action is also a November deadline. It's non-binding, so if offered admission, you have until May 1st to decide. You don't have to accept on the spot. It's almost like, think of it this way. Early decision, you're ready to get married. Early action, you're dating. So early action, you're playing the field a little bit. Early decision, you're ready to commit to one person. So early action tends to be mostly state schools. So you want to hit those early action deadlines for state schools. Binghamton, Rutgers, Maryland, Michigan, University of Illinois, University of Texas, Austin. These are all state schools that'll have a November 1st deadline. If you are an out-of-state student and you apply after that deadline, your chances go down considerably. I'll give you an example. If you apply to University of Michigan November 2nd, you are not getting in. They are reserving spaces for their out-of-state students that apply by early action. And after that, they have an in-state quota that they have to fulfill to get funding from their state governments. So any early action deadline, it's a good idea to hit that deadline for a state school. Now there's an interesting deadline called restrictive early action. Anyone have any idea what that is? Restrictive early action exists with 4 schools: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. Restrictive early action means that if you decide to apply their early action, you will not apply to any early decisions. They're restricting you. But if you're offered admission to Stanford or Harvard or Yale or Princeton, you're not bound to go there the way you are Columbia early decision, Brown early decision, Dartmouth early decision. Now, typically a student who gets in restrictive early action to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or Stanford will take them up on the offer. But for the most part, they do let you play the financial aid field to see if you need to compare offers to other schools. If you want to do a Columbia early decision and a Michigan early action, that's okay. But if you get into Columbia early decision, you have to withdraw your Michigan application. Let's say you did Harvard restrictive early action. You could do that with Michigan also, but if admitted, you're not bound to Harvard. You cannot do Harvard restrictive early action with the Columbia early decision. Okay? Then the regular decision applicant pool is where the vast majority of applications come from. That's the January 1st deadline. We're able to compare multiple offers that come out late March and decide where you want to matriculate by the May 1st deadline. All right, so I'm gonna get to some of these questions here, and then I'll go into the next important step when it comes to admissions, which is standardized testing. So looking at your questions, I'll go from the top. Are schools transparent regarding their focus on demonstrated interest? That is a great question. If a school says we do not track demonstrated interest, you could trust that. They will literally not track demonstrated interest. That being said, if you meet with an admissions representative, it never hurts to email them after and thank you for meeting them and to write a nice line about their visit. That doesn't get you in, but it does place a name to the application when they eventually see your application. So there is subjectivity in the admission process. It's not just scores and grades equal yes or no. That's the case more in the European system, in the Canadian system. In America, there's a holistic review, and there is a little bit of a human element. Now, when Yale and Brown say we don't care about demonstrated interest, they do mean it. You don't have to go visit there to get in. Their thinking is if kids get in, they're probably interested in coming here. But a school like a small liberal arts college, it's very helpful for them to know because there are so many small liberal arts colleges that, you know what, this student really is interested. A school like WashU is another example. A school like Tufts is another example. Demonstrating interest is huge for those schools. Next, does it hurt if parent is on the mailing list and not student? There's actually no reason for a parent to be in the mailing list because they're not trying to recruit you. They're looking for the mailing list your year of graduating high school, your intended major. It just doesn't make sense for a parent to be on it. That being said, if a family wants to have one email account that anyone can access from the family, let's say first name dot last name at Gmail, that's a good idea. Or I'm seeing here, Donna Gitter, you're next to me on this list. So if it's Gitter family at AOL, whatever that is, that's okay. But it should be the student's information on the mailing list. So parents can read emails if the students are okay with that, but all the information should be the student's information. So that's a good question. People who are trying to get in for recruitment, this is important to know. So recruited athletes, I'm sorry if your spring semester was wiped out. It's awful, and hopefully you'll have a fall season if you have that coming up. You have to be a little bit more proactive with the admission process if you want to be a recruited athlete. That means having footage of your successes and sending it out to coaches well before senior year so that it can have you on their radar. So I would say if you are thinking of being a recruited athlete, be proactive this summer in getting your profile ready so that you'll be on the watch list of different coaches of different schools. Okay. Classes for nursing majors. So if you're thinking of applying to schools with nursing, there are a lot of schools that have great nursing, NYU, University of Pennsylvania, etc. It's a good idea to be strong in biochem and physics. They're looking for that. If you want to take an AP in biology, that's pretty common also, but good grades in the sciences will be helpful. Okay. Next, question about financial aid and early decision. This is a great question. Early decision means if admitted, you're not able to compare multiple financial aid packages. So that means you're ready to commit to a certain type of price if offered admission. Now that sounds like an exorbitant fee for a lot of families, and it is. So prior to applying, you can actually use something called the net price calculator. It's on every university's financial aid website. So tonight, parents, a little homework assignment, think of any school your son or daughter is interested in. Google that school. Let's say that school is Boston University. Google Boston University net price calculator. It'll take you right to their net price calculator on their financial aid website. What this device does is it'll take into account parent income from the prior year. So let's say mom and dad plug in their income from 2019. And then that'll come up with a number of what BU deems your estimated contribution figure to that school, and if they can be able to give you some financial aid. So if parents make a combined income that is exceeding what BU thinks is their threshold to give financial aid, they'll let you know that. And they'll say you probably wouldn't get financial aid from us. Parents like to ask, what is that number? It is different for every school. So what that means is that for a more expensive private school, income tends to be a little bit higher when it comes to needing some financial aid. A school like CUNY, as an in-state public, parent income could be lower and they'll still say you don't need aid, but for BU, you really would need the aid. So let's say, just give you an example, combined income, and I'll say $75,000. CUNY will say, we think you could pay the $6,000. A private school will say, we don't think you could pay the $70,000. So you see what I'm saying? It's different types of aid packages you could get from different types of schools. So prior to applying, you could do the net price calculator. Then when you actually apply in October, so let's say there are juniors in this room, parents this October can file something called the prior FAFSA. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is the document that colleges all use when it comes to looking at financial figures to see what kind of package you could get. Schools might also consider other documents like a CSS profile, which is on the College Board's website. But the prior FAFSA that you'll file in October can give you an aid estimate so that if offered admission in December, you'll get that right away. This is only enacted a few years ago. And what it used to be was you'd apply for the FAFSA in January based on 2020 income figures. Now they're saying you can apply the prior FAFSA, so October, based on 2019, so you get an early read on what an aid package could look like. Now, people might have different salaries this year than the prior year as a result of coronavirus, and colleges and their financial aid offices are definitely taking that into account. So you only want to do early decision if you know that there's a good chance the school can give you financial aid based on your income figures and based on your doing your research through net price calculator and the prior FAFSA. Okay, next question. Do you have a big advantage in college admissions if you go to a local high school compared to going to a specialized high school? So the answer is that colleges look at the student within the context of their high school. Colleges won't penalize a student for going to a school where they're the only applicant. If that student is a superstar from that school and they've never seen an applicant before, they'll look at the school profile, something that every school counselor sends for every application to indicate what the school is all about. Let's say you go to a large public high school where there are 200 kids applying early to a school. Colleges also know that. They know it's a very strong school, and they'll still take a very large number of those students most likely. So there are advantages to certain high schools in different realms, but in college admissions, it's how the student does within what the high school has to offer. Can you apply to several early decisions? That's a great question. You can apply to one school, early decision 1. You could do one school, early decision 2, if you were not admitted to an early decision 1 school. Early decision 2 is pretty common for students who maybe, let's say, applied to Columbia early decision 1. They weren't admitted. They don't want to wait out what the Ivy Leagues could look like in regular decision, where it's a total bloodbath. And in early decision 2, they think, you know what, I'm actually very excited about going to NYU. I have a better chance in easy 2 than waiting out regular decision. So early decision 2 sometimes is a higher quality applicant pool as a result. I'll give you an example. When I used to work at NYU and I did admissions for Stern School of Business, you could tell the early decision 2 applicant who didn't get into Penn Wharton early decision 1. Very often it's a stronger, higher caliber of applicant who maybe applied somewhere more selective in ED1. Next question. Are you at a disadvantage for being able to negotiate a financial aid package if you apply early decision? It's an interesting question because colleges don't want to admit you and give you a poor aid package that will cause you to transfer after freshman year. They care about the retention. Retention is very important to them. However, in regular decision, you could say, you know what, thank you for your package. I was actually offered this amount from this other really competitive school. Can you match that somehow? Early decision doesn't let you do that. So it is better to compare financial aid packages through regular decision than to rely on a strong aid package early and say, please give more. They might give a couple thousand more, but let's say they gapped you $25,000 and you thought, I really could have used that $25,000 extra. They might just give you $2,000 or $3,000, not $22,000 more, okay? How much do college admissions look at your high school's reputation? So the admission representative who comes to your school or who reads for your school will get to know your territory very well. So I'm located, for example, in the Bronx in Riverdale, and we have admission representatives who come to our school every year, and they know our school and Fieldston and Horace Mann and Riverdale Country and Bronx High School Science. That is part of their job, to know the schools in their region. So it's important that if there's a new rep, for example, because the previous one changed offices, that your school counselor will develop a relationship with that new rep, and that's something every school will do. What about highly selective, small focus schools like Sophie Davis? What's the admission statistics? Very, very highly selective. Any combined medical program, Sophie Davis is one example, Brown has another, Boston University, University of Rochester, those are even more selective. They invite very few for an interview, and from there invite very few to be admitted, but it's a very high profile of an applicant. What are expectations for extracurriculars to get into top 10 type college? We'll get there shortly. The schools, after you get admitted, usually provide opportunities to get scholarships. It's a great question. 2 websites I want you to take with you tonight, and I'm going to write them into the chat, so this way you have it for the future. One is scholarships.com, and one is fineaid.org. These are really 2 strong vehicles to search for any type of scholarships that are out there. The website I mentioned before is called the FAFSA, which is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That's the actual application to file for financial aid. And separate from that, a number of schools will want to see the CSS profile on the College Board website. So these are some websites to take with you from tonight. Now, there are a lot of private scholarships that are out there, and then some schools might have merit scholarships you can apply for directly. For sports scholarships, that's if it's Division I school through the NCAA. So look at the NCAA website. When it comes to scholarships, there are a lot of random private scholarships. There's a redheaded scholarship. There's a left-handed scholarship. So you could look these up. Very few of them will just give $25,000. They might give anywhere from $500 to $3,000. These add up. So to apply for a number of these scholarships is something to consider. All right, I'm looking at other questions here before I continue. These are great questions you guys have. Does it hurt diversity, adversity initiatives to come from a private high school versus public? And the answer is no. They're looking for students from both. They're looking for students that are good matches for their school. The admissions rep for Columbia once said, we have a puzzle to fill every year. We're looking to fill a puzzle. So what's in that puzzle? Could be they need a new quarterback for the football team. Could be they need a new member of the marching band. Could be they are looking for students that come from the Pacific Northwest. Could be they're looking for students to fulfill more STEM majors for females. There's no idea, you won't know what it is they're looking for, but they have their institutional priorities they need to fulfill every year. So whether you come from public or private, if you can fulfill their institutional needs, that's helpful for them. Guides for an upcoming 10th grader. So I'll talk about extracurriculars is a really important thing. If you are currently 9th and 10th grade, the most important things to think about now, academic achievement, doing as well as you can in school, and being engaged in extracurriculars either in school or the community at large or both. I'll get to that in a bit. How are poor science but high math grades seen in applications for engineering programs? So for the more selective engineering schools, they're looking for high grades in math and science, but there are engineering schools that aren't as highly selective, or you can go to a school for liberal arts and internally transfer into engineering. That's an option oftentimes at a lot of schools. A child with a 99 average from a private school like Xavier versus specialized high school like Brooklyn Latin with a lower GPA. It's not that black and white. They're not comparing your school, your GPA to another school, that GPA. They're looking at the entire picture. They also look at the grade distribution chart within your school, and that's offered in the school profile. So the colleges know if a certain school gives A's more freely versus if it's rare to get an A. They could see what classes are offered and what types of grades are distributed through those classes. Extracurriculars for Ivy League schools I'll go into. How much does legacy factor into admission these days? Legacy is important if all things are equal. And I'll go into what all those things are. Legacy is typically parent or grandparent. Some schools will look into siblings, not all schools. Barnard looks into aunts and cousins, everyone who's female. That's not the case with most schools. You don't get in because of legacy. You get in because you have the credentials, and legacy gives you the extra push. Can you get accepted early decision by multiple schools? No, just one school early decision. And if you don't get into that one school, you could do an early decision too, just one school. Are there preferences between IB and AP and schools that are early college, such as Bard? Concerned about colleges accepting the AS degrees credits offered in early college high schools. So colleges look to see that you're taking a rigorous curriculum. Whether that's through AP or IB or dual credits, it looks rigorous. Even if it comes from a community college, it still looks rigorous. I have a private question. What if your high school is low ranked where not a lot of people attend Ivy League? Will Ivy Leagues pick any percentage of children from this low ranked high schools? You bet. Ivy Leagues are looking for those diamonds in the rough. They're looking for students who maybe didn't have the resources at hand, but they took advantage of what they had and went above and beyond the call of duty to make themselves look more competitive. Which colleges fill most of their seats with early decision applications? A lot of private schools will be taking about 50% of their class through early decision. NYU takes about 60% of their class through ED1, ED2. That does not mean a 60% admit rate. That means that they're taking the majority of the students through these rounds. Hi, Libby. This is my daughter. Want to wave? What if school is far away and doesn't know my high school? It's a great question. That is the territory representative's job to actually do research on that school and to learn more about it. You mentioned far away. Remember, these colleges are recruiting kids internationally. So that's very far away. So they have kids coming from Europe, from Asia, from Africa. So it's not an expectation that a school will only know someone if they're from a local region. Okay, I need some space now, my love. Thank you. How do we know what institutional needs are for a specific college? You don't. That's their own internal admissions office criteria. Moses, I need some space. Thank you. So you can't decide if they're going to need you or not. You just put your best foot forward and do the best you can. Now, there are some sports that are more rare, squash being one of them, crew, as opposed to, let's say, football, basketball. So if you're a stellar athlete in those sports, you have a little bit of an edge. If you play an instrument in the band that's a little bit less popular, that can give you an edge also for some schools. Can you apply for scholarships as a junior? There might be some scholarships you can apply for as a junior, but for the most part, they are for students going to college the next fall. FastWeb's also another good website. Thank you. Who sends the high school profile to colleges? That's your school counselor. And that very often goes along with recommendation letters. If you go to a specialized high school for a certain major, however, in college don't want to pursue that major, can you work on that major during your 4 years of high school, help your application? So yeah, let's say you go to LaGuardia School of the Arts. It doesn't mean that whatever your program is there, that you have to pursue that program in college. It is totally okay to have other interests. Colleges, they expect that. Okay, so they can't possibly look at the whole application for thousands and thousands of applicants. How do they make the cuts? Is it just grades? When do they get to extracurriculars? I'll get to all that shortly, but I'll tell you this much, that they are looking at thousands and thousands of applications. However, they might spend only a few minutes on those that aren't as competitive. Make sense? So it might be just a quick glance, look at scores, look at grades. They see a student is far below profile. Everything else is a quick scan as opposed to a direct read. So they are looking at them, but they might look more closely at students who are competitive. Is it better to have an extremely high math grade in honors math class or a lower grade in AP math? So this is the question I get all the time. Better to have AP, get a B, or honors and get an A? The answer, and you're not going to like it, for the most selective school will be AP getting an A, right? They're looking for the highest level curriculum with the highest grades. That being said, you don't only have to apply to the most highly selective schools. So my answer to that question is really be in the level where you intellectually belong. Don't worry about the grade. I find that students might say, I'm going to take a lower level class and get that A, but they end up being bored in that class and they don't work as hard because they feel like this is too easy for them, and then they underachieve. Or a student will say, I need to be in the highest level class, I have to do everything I can to get the A, but the material just is above them and they struggle, and it causes them to struggle in other classes and it brings down their self-esteem. That's not worth it as much. Okay, there are a lot of questions here. You guys are great. Let me go into the rest of the factors in admission and then I'll answer more questions. Feel free to type them into the chat. So I mentioned the transcript as most important. Alongside the transcript for schools that are not test optional, I could talk about that later, is standardized testing. Vast majority of highly selective schools still require the SAT, ACT. So the SAT or ACT is something that is going to be looked at alongside the transcript. So let's say someone has straight A's, but a really low score, that's gonna knock them out from some colleges. If someone has unbelievable scores, but really low GPA, that'll knock them out of the most selective schools. But there'll be schools that aren't selective that will love a really high standardized test score. SAT or ACT, it doesn't matter which one. Sometimes people think, oh, these colleges want these scores. No. I would say a generation ago, the ACT was a Midwest bias and the College Board SAT was more popular in the East Coast, West Coast. Not anymore. Colleges just want high scores that could pump up their numbers for US News and World Report rankings. So they don't care if it's SAT or ACT. SAT is offered at a 1600. There are 2 sections, evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics, each out of 800. And they're both given a lot of weight, but for engineering schools, that math is even more important, same with business schools. ACT is out of 36. It measures English, math, reading, and science. Each section's out of 36. Then they create a new composite based on those averages. So the ACT has an additional science section. It's not biochem and physics. It's science, reading comprehension, graphs with data to analyze. There are a lot of differences between the 2 tests, and Quello Prep, I'm sure, could go over all these with you ad nauseum. ACT is a little bit more of a time crunch. You have to work a little bit faster for the ACT. There are more questions proportional to the time offered. So someone who needs more time, the ACT can be a little bit tougher. So that's something to think about. The SAT, the reading passages, the verbal vocabulary tend to be a little bit more sophisticated than the ACT. So whether it's SAT or ACT, colleges that require testing are looking for scores. Now, a number of schools have become test optional. Columbia just yesterday, Barnard a few weeks ago, Cornell, Cooper Union. Test optional means that in light of COVID and the lack of number of test administrations in recent months, they'll look at the holistic picture if you don't have testing to offer. That being said, really high testing can only help your chances with test optional schools, because they'll still want to have some testing to report to US News and World Report. So if you are a straight A student in all honors and AP classes and you have the extracurricular gravitas and the clout, then and if you don't have the testing, let's say Columbia is looking for mid 1500s, if you don't have it, maybe then you go test optional if you only have, let's say, a 1410. But if you have that mid 1500s, you send that score to Columbia. That's going to be helpful for you. So standardized testing encompasses SAT, ACT. Other forms of standardized testing are subject tests. So that's proficiency in a particular subject, whether it is in a science like biochem or physics. English is literature. Math is Math 1 or Math 2. And Math 2 looks a little better. It's a little more advanced. Foreign language of all kinds. And history, there's US history, there's world history. For this year's cycle, subject tests are not going to matter as much as a result of the lack of months. We don't know if that's going to be the case for sophomores and freshmen and beyond. Subject tests are out of 800. Even for juniors now, if you have high subject test scores, that can only help you. It can't hurt. So it doesn't hurt to have very high scores in a couple of subjects. Very often, if you're in an AP class or a high honors class, doing really well in that course oftentimes translates to doing well on a subject test as long as you prepare. People ask me all the time about test prep. And my answer to that is, if you're an athlete who's going to have a game, do you practice beforehand or do you just go to a game? You tend to practice beforehand. If you are a thespian about to have a performance, do you just go to the stage or do you have rehearsals? The answer is you have rehearsals. Same idea with test prep. You have to have some type of test prep, whether it's test prep company or on your own. On your own is a little bit harder. It takes a really motivated student. So test prep companies do help with keeping you on course for the test that you're taking. The other types of standardized testing, they have AP exams, IB exams. These are important. It's more important that you have a strong grade in the year. So let's say you're averaging a C in AP Bio, but you get a 5 in the exam. The 5 is important. The AP exams are scored out of 5, but colleges do not want to see that C for the year. If you have an A in AP Bio and then a 5 in the exam, that's even better. There's also PSAT, which something juniors can take to get themselves eligible for National Merit Scholarship type of qualifications. That is not nearly as important as the actual SAT. So the preliminary is more of a diagnostic to give you a sense if that test is the right test for you versus, let's say, a practice ACT. But don't put too much stock in that test being the end-all be-all. It is not. The way SAT, ACT have the higher stakes. If there are any questions about standardized testing, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll go to those also. Next things to look at. So transcript standardized testing are really the 1 and 1A. After that, there's no direct order. They consist of extracurriculars, essays, recommendation letters, and other factors miscellaneous that I'll go over. So let's talk about extracurriculars. Colleges are looking for students that have multi-year commitments to a few things. Now, some students think I have to have 20 activities and I have to pile it all on senior year. No, they're looking for students that have 2 to 4 years of commitment to maybe 3 or 4 activities. And the idea is that on the application, it asks hours per week and weeks per year. So if you're writing, I do this activity half hour a week, that activity half hour a week, and you have 20 of those, that's not going to be as impressive as something that you do 5 hours a week for the whole year, and if you have 2 or 3 of those. So looking to see that you have commitment, multi-years, with a good number of hours per week. Now, the hours per week shouldn't exceed the amount of hours there actually are in the week. So you can't over-embellish. You have to really be honest with that. Extracurriculars for most schools, whether it's being on a sports team, whether it's being part of an academic club on campus, or it's being part of choir or drama, whatever it is, there's no right extracurricular, okay? That being said, colleges do look to see if you have leadership. Are you president of a club? Are you a founder of an organization? Are you captain of a team? These are things they look at. The most selective schools, the Ivy Leagues, the most selectives aren't just looking for extracurriculars in school, out of school. They're looking for separation. What do you have that separates you from a pack of many compelling applicants? So let's give an example. I had a student a couple of years ago who's an ice hockey player. That's great, so are thousands of people. What he did was he went to Harlem and taught kids how to skate and taught them ice hockey. That's a little bit more of a separation factor. So the idea is that you want to think of what it is that you do and the activities that are interesting to you, you're passionate about, and think how you become a change agent as a result of that activity. That's what the Ivy Leagues are looking for. And you don't have to have 20 things that you do. It could just be a couple of things where you are that change agent. I have a student who's a junior now who's thinking big time schools. And he is doing something a lot of people are now doing coronavirus. He's been doing it for years, where he's set up nursing homes technology and teaching senior citizens how to email and how to use Zoom now. Now, a lot of kids are doing that in my school through coronavirus, and that's wonderful. But that's the idea. It's something that you're interested in. He's interested in technology, and he's really strong in STEM. And he's going beyond just, I'm part of this club or that activity. It's, I'm trying to make a difference in society. That's what the Ivy Leagues are looking for, among many other things. But the idea is someone who has that separation factor. Not every student has that in them, and that's okay. Moms and dads, don't push your kids too hard if they don't have the time for it and all of a sudden their grades go down, or if they don't have a temperament for it. Not everyone is a major leader, and that's okay. There'll still be plenty of colleges that'll want you. But the idea is for the most selective schools, you have to think, how am I going to show separation? Okay? Having the top scores and top grades, those give you the chips to play poker. You're at the table. That doesn't mean you win the hand, okay? The way you win the hand is you have a lot more impressive chips to show. So extracurriculars are important to schools in school and or out of school. Out of school, they look more for commitment for extracurriculars and service in your community. The idea of going to Costa Rica and digging latrines is so nice. They'd rather you dig up latrines in New York City. They'd rather you help out in your local community than feel like you have to spend $6,000 on an abroad trip because you were seduced into going to being abroad. So it's more impressive to them that you're able to do service at your local community. Community service is not a one-day thing. So if you have some type of monthly or weekly commitment, that's going to impress them more. It's not just something you do once a year. So whether it's in school, out of school, sometimes people have a misconception. I have to be in athletics, and I have to have community service, and I have to do drama, and I have to do an academic team, and I have to play an instrument, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. It's not that. It's a few things, 2 or 3, with major commitments. People ask me about the summers a lot. The summers, they're not looking for people to break the bank in the summer. If you have a job as a busboy at a restaurant or a waiter as a restaurant, that is as impressive to them as anything that's out there. If you are an usher at a movie theater because you want to make money for your family to have spending money, that is as impressive as anything that's out there. So it shouldn't feel like you have to do the most expensive type of offering because these programs entice you by saying this will help your college resume. Any part-time job, or in the summer, full-time job, will enhance your resume. I had a student one summer whose goal was to read 50 books, and she read 50 books in the summer, and she had that list that she put in her application. That impresses schools, the intellectual interest and the idea of being well-read. Columbia, for example, on their application has a question, list all the books you've read for pleasure this past year. If that list is going to be only 1 or 2 or 3 books, you're not getting into Columbia. Doesn't matter how impressive everything else is. They're looking to see how intellectual you are. And that list should include books that are related to your major of interest. If they ask, what cultural exhibits have you seen the past year, or films have you seen, or concerts? Being in New York City, they expect to see some things. Now, obviously, things are closed now, but films you could see online still, so that's still a possibility. But the idea is that the summer, you shouldn't feel like that is going to make your resume. The summer should be to enhance your during the school year resume. So science research is a good example, but people who think I'll do amazing stuff in the summer and do nothing during the school year, they don't get into these types of colleges. They're looking for students who could balance the academic rigors with extracurricular commitment, because those students in high school become committed students on the college campus. If you have any questions about extracurriculars, of course, feel free to put it in the chat. I see 41 messages I'll get to, and I promise I'll get to them. Next, let's talk about essays. So there's one essay that is going to work for the vast majority of selective schools. Most of them are on the Common App and or Coalition App. And these are application vehicles where you can apply. Some schools have their own unique application. MIT is one. They're not on the Common App or Coalition App. Most schools are on one or the other. So one essay will tend to work for a lot of these schools. And then I'll talk about supplemental essays in a second. When it comes to the college essay, you want to think to yourself, I need to have a compelling intro sentence to convince them to read my intro paragraph, which will convince them to read the whole essay. A really strong opening sentence, a powwow, amazing opening paragraph, and a wow opening paragraph, and then a really strong essay. So it shouldn't be it's boring, bland. It'll have a great last sentence. They're not going to get to that last sentence unless you really capture them and you invite them in through the opening. When it comes to the college essay, the biggest mistake people make is they ask 20 different people to edit it. You ask 20 people to edit it, you're going to get 20 different answers. Ask an English teacher, ask a counselor, that's it. If you ask every family member, you're going to drive yourself crazy. The idea is that for the more competitive schools, an essay is one of the separation factors. People like to ask, but I don't have anything to say. I disagree. Everyone has a story. Everyone has something to say. Now, your essay does not need to be about coronavirus. Colleges actually prefer it's not. There's actually going to be a space in the Common App to talk about the coronavirus experience. However, if you have a very compelling coronavirus story, that could be your college essay. So having a coronavirus essay because you're sad that you're quarantined, it's not going to do it. But if it really impacted you and your family in a very profound way, that could be a college essay. A college essay could be about your extracurricular that you really enjoy the most, about a relationship you have with someone, about a time where you experienced failure, and then you pick yourself up. There are a lot of different prompts that are out there, but one of them is topic of your choice. So you really can write about anything. When it comes to the essay, you shouldn't feel like I have to answer this one prompt. This is the one they want to see. They don't. They just want to see about you and your personality somehow coming across. Colleges are looking for very strong writers. So even if you're applying for engineering or business, they're expecting strong writers. So it shouldn't be, I'm really strong in math and science. The essay doesn't matter as much. Not at all. The essay still matters. When it comes to the essay, it's usually a 650 word maximum. Doesn't have to be 650 words. It could be 580, 620. It shouldn't be 220. And it can't be 651. It'll actually get cut off in the application if you exceed it. So the important thing to know about the essay also, you want to write concisely, get to the point. There's not a lot of room for fluff in a 650 word college essay. And you want to make sure that you really captivate them and you think about the audience. They're looking for people who will make good roommates, who will make good students in the classroom, who will be good floor mates. If you're someone who is not open to diversity, That's not something good to put in the essay. If you're someone who's not open to globalism and globalization, that's not something good to put in the essay. They're looking for people who are open-minded citizens. And, oh, sorry, if you can all mute yourselves, that would be great. And they're looking for people who are going to be active on campus and creating a great community of people who care about the other people. They don't just care about themselves. People ask all the time, is it okay if I am conservative to write about being in the high school Republican club? That's okay. The idea is that admissions offices are liberal, but they're expecting people to be of different types of persuasions, as long as you come across as someone who's understanding of other people. Now, I'm not trying to get political here and saying certain parties are more understanding than others, but it's important that it comes across that you are someone who cares about diversity. You care about globalization. You care about your fellow campus mates, even if they're from backgrounds you've never met before. That's important to colleges. When it comes to your essay, you should not do a resume rewrite. So it shouldn't be paragraph 1, I'm on this club. Paragraph 2, I'm on that club. Paragraph 3, I do this club. That's not what they're looking for. That's an extracurricular activities chart portion of the application. So for the essay, if you want to write about an activity, hone in on that one activity and let that be your theme throughout. So it shouldn't be, you really want to focus on 3 activities, body paragraph 1, 2, and 3. It's not like that. It's really one story that's going to be the highlight of who you are, okay? In addition to an essay, the most competitive schools also have supplemental essays. Supplemental essays can fit into multiple categories. One is the, why do you want to go to X university? That's pretty common. A lot of schools have why Columbia, or why Michigan, or why name of the school. So you have to do your research. You have to know why you want to go to that school, and they have to read it and think to themselves, okay, did this person just substitute Columbia for NYU and it's the same essay? They want to know that you really know the nuances of their school. That means you've done research on courses of interest in that school, core curriculum, it really interests you. Certain faculty members you might want to do research with. So it's not just saying, I want to go to Columbia because it's an Ivy League school in New York City and I can go to the museums. That ain't going to cut it. For Columbia, it's really knowing about the core curriculum and what are aspects of the core that really fascinate you. And how are you intellectual? And how are you someone who's going to take advantage of New York City, but the essay is really specific to Columbia because there's a lot of schools in New York City. How does Columbia take advantage of New York City? So that's the type of essay for the why do you want to go to X university. A lot of schools will have, why do you want to study this department at our university? So if you're going to say, I'm undecided, I'm not sure, no, that's not an essay. It's maybe I'm not sure exactly which major, but my numerous interests include sociology, journalism, politics, and here's why I'm really interested in these, and here's why your school's the right fit for me. So very often an essay for a college might be, why do you want to go to this school? Or why do you want to major in what you listed as your major for this school? Then they might have a question about community. Talk about a community that's important to you and why is that going to be important to you in this college? And sometimes people will say, oh, they don't want to hear about my community. They've already read it before. Whatever your community is important to you. I had a student write a really great essay this past year for University of Chicago about his Model UN community and how when he goes on Model UN conferences and he meets people from all these other high schools, he has this community with them for just a few days, but that lasts forever. It was a really powerful essay about how community isn't just the people you see all day, every day, and you have certain backgrounds with and commonalities. It could be that one time you met someone from a similar community and those 3 days stayed with you. So there's different ways, different angles for that type of essay. Supplemental essays could be anywhere from one essay, NYU has a 400-word essay, why NYU, to a school like Stanford has numerous ones. Stanford has one, write a letter to your future roommate. What do you want to say to him or her? Yale has like these really quick blips, like really quick essays, 125 words or less. Princeton has multiple. So these take time. So the summer before senior year, working on these supplemental essays is probably a good idea in addition to the main Common App essay. I can't express how many students do an amazing job on their Common App essay, and then supplemental essays they'll type 2 nights before. Big mistake. Supplemental essay is even more important for a lot of schools than the main Common App essay. Barnard, for example, their supplemental essays is everything. If you have the scores and the grades and extracurriculars, but you don't demonstrate to them that you are a Barnard female and you belong, you're not getting in. One of their questions is, pick a woman in history you'd like to have a conversation with. Why do you choose her? What would you talk about? That's a pretty sophisticated essay. And very often the essays represent the values of the school. University of Chicago is known for the uncommon essay and how out of the box they are. that is something that's very unique to why Chicago. So you want to get to know the personality of the school, and very often you could see that through the essay. So I spoke about transcripts, standardized testing, extracurriculars, and essays. Let's talk about recommendation letters. This is a huge part of the application for the more selective schools. You'll want to ask 2 teachers, and then you'll have a school official, which could be your school counselor, could be a vice principal. Your school might have a certain advisory program of someone writing it for you. That school official writes the macro level, the big picture of you in the context of your community, and your school teachers write within the context of the classroom itself. It could be that your counselor or your teachers might ask you to fill out a questionnaire for them. That is really helpful for the recommendation letter. Parents, you might be asked to fill out like a rave form, a brag form. That's really helpful for the recommendation letter. When it comes to recommendation letters from teachers, you want to ask English, history, math, science, or foreign language, 2 of those 5. If you're thinking of engineering, it's a good idea to have physics or chemistry or math. If you're thinking of business, it's a good idea to have math. When it comes to recommendation letters, the preference is junior year. A lot of schools are okay with 1 junior, 1 sophomore instead of 2 junior teachers. But Barnard is an example of a school that's not. They prefer 2 junior teachers. So you want to think about the relationships you develop with teachers in the classroom. With whom have you participated a lot? Maybe there's certain projects where you really excelled. Maybe there's small group work and you were the leader of that. Maybe you were shy at first and you really built up to be a powerhouse in the class through the second semester. These are things to think about. If you're currently a junior and you have lost the past few months of in-person teaching, think about the teachers with whom you were a really stellar student, very invested and committed through that March date where your school had to close. When it comes to recommendation letters, colleges do not want to see more than the 2 teachers and the counselor. However, if you have 1 supplemental essay, maybe it was an internship supervisor, maybe it was research fieldwork supervisor, that's okay, but it shouldn't be every single person that you know. It shouldn't be mom, dad, neighbors, aunt, uncle. I think it's funny sometimes the kids will get like a politician, but it's clear the politician doesn't know them. They're just doing a favor for the parents. So it's important that someone who you might ask supplemental letters for, which is not required, is someone who really knows you very well and can offer a different lens than the 2 teachers and the school official. Recommendation letters are not going to make up for a really low transcript or really lower scores. It's something to enhance the application and everything else that goes with it. I have to sneeze. Sneeze went away. Okay. Next aspect.
No sneezing allowed. Sorry.
No sneezing.
Thought you should know. No sneezing. Don't do it. Even through the phone. Even through the camera. Nothing.
You can feel bad
Nothing.
karma if I sneeze, right?
Nothing.
A lot of schools, especially public schools, do not offer interviews. A lot of private schools will offer interviews. A lot of them might say they're optional. It's a good idea, even if they're optional, take advantage of that option. Look at the admission webpage of any school you're interested in to see what their interview protocol is. For some schools, you first have to apply, then they'll invite you. For other schools, you can actually schedule them months in advance of your application. So thinking Barnard, Columbia, because this is New York City, Barnard, you can schedule them months in advance and they fill up. Columbia, it's only once you apply, they might invite you for an interview. So interviews are oftentimes done by an alum in a Starbucks in the city. I don't know what it's going to look like next year with coronavirus, but typically that's what an interview is. Or some schools that are smaller pools might be an admission person doing it during their travels, or it might be a senior who works in the admissions office. Whoever the interview is, the important thing to know is that an interview is not the reason you get in. An interview is something that's not going to make up for modest test scores or a lower GPA. An interview is something that works out if all other pieces are there. So I've heard kids say, I don't have the grades or scores for Harvard, but I'm going to wow them in an interview. And I say that interview carries no sway if you don't have the grades or scores. So the important thing to know with interviews is that it can hurt. A really poor interview can be the reason you don't get in if you don't come across as someone who's open to ideas and to other people, for example. But a really strong interview is another nice check mark on the application. I had a student 10 years ago now. The Yale admissions representative was someone I knew who actually interviewed him and said, this is the best kid I've ever interviewed in my entire life. She spent 2.5 hours with him. Guess what? He didn't get into Yale, but he got into Harvard, Princeton, Chicago, Columbia, and Cornell. So the interview could be the most amazing thing ever, but don't leave thinking, that's it, I got in. It's just, this is another nice checkbox, and maybe this person will do a great write-up for me, That's not going to be the reason that I get in. There are other factors that admission takes into account. It could be that they have certain types of diversity they're looking for. So for example, engineering, being female is helpful. Business schools, being female. Male for certain liberal arts fields is helpful. Certain ethnic, religious, socioeconomic, geographic backgrounds can be helpful. If your last name is Kennedy and you want to buy a library for the school, that's helpful. But that's not the case with most people, so don't worry about that part of admissions. But the idea is that these miscellaneous factors, you're not really in control of it. Don't feel badly about yourself if you don't have that hook. A hook is a big part of admissions for a lot of schools, but most people don't have hooks. Okay, so now questions. We have a lot of questions here. I'd love to go through them and help you guys out with answers. And if you have any questions that come up, of course, feel free to ask questions in this chat. So how is the process going to be different this year from years past? This is the million-dollar question. And if I had the exact answers to this, I would be a multimillionaire. And the reason why is things are changing by the week. More colleges are going test optional. That's the reality. But things are changing in that test centers are closing. College boards said for the past few months that they're going to have online tests. They said yesterday, we really can't do it anymore. So that's what I'm saying, things change by the day. How is it going to look different? I think you're going to see fewer early decision applications for a lot of schools because a lot of people, their savings were negatively impacted by coronavirus. You might see people who are not inclined to spend $75,000 for private school education if it might be remote for a period of time until there's a vaccine. How things will look different also is schools that are test optional. They are test optional, but if you have testing, that will really help for those schools if you're above the profile. The way you know if you're above a profile, you could look up online. Let's say I want to look up Tulane. Tulane University, middle 50% SAT. Look up Tulane, middle 50% ACT, and it'll tell you what the middle 50% is. So let's say a school says their middle 50% of their SAT is a 1420 to 1520, just to give an example. That means 25% of their students are above a 1520, 25% are below a 1420, and 50% is within that 100-point range. Who gets in below a 1420? Very often it's a kid who has a hook of some kind. Could be someone through early decision. But usually you want to be on the higher end of any middle 50% if you don't have that hook. All right, how admissions might look different this year as well. There might not be as many international applicants, or might not be as many international students who are admitted because schools are afraid of accepting students who might not be able to come. It also might be that schools will not be able to recruit as much as they were used to and go to schools. It might be they'll do more Zoom meetings with prospective seniors. Also, how it's going to look different. I think it's interesting because I think that financial aid is going to be a bigger factor for a lot of colleges. And the schools that have higher endowments will have stronger coffers to give out really generous financial aid packages. So some schools aren't as generous as others. And you can always work together with the financial aid office, speak to financial aid counselors to see what a package could look like for your family based on income. Question, how easily can you transfer in schools for different majors and programs? It's a great question. Schools that have multiple undergraduate colleges, let's use NYU as an example. There's an arts and science, Tisch School of the Arts, Stern School of Business, there's a School of Social Work, there is a Gallatin School of Individualized Study. What you're talking about is something called an internal transfer. And schools allow for internal transfers as long as you reach the parameters that they are seeking. So what does that mean? If you want to internally transfer from College of Arts and Science to Stern School of Business at NYU, they're looking to see if you've taken calculus, macroeconomics, microeconomics, and have done really well in those classes. So internal transfer is very feasible. A school like WashU in St. Louis is a little bit more fluid in letting you go from one school to the other. Other schools might have some type of wall in between where you actually have to apply and do a whole admission process. Do colleges have race quotas, especially for the Asian group? That is a great question, and every college has their own institutional priorities. I don't think there is a maximum, but I think they don't want to be below a minimum, if that makes sense. So I don't think they'll say we can't have more than this number of Asians, but I think they would say we don't want to have fewer than that number of Asians. And I think that's the case with African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, etc., that they want to have diversity, but they don't want to have below a minimum number. what you're seeing in the news with Harvard and affirmative action against Asian applicants, it could be real. We just don't know. We don't know what's going on in the inner workings of admission offices. But I would say that they are looking for students to stand out, regardless of what background you are, at the most selective level. How do you make your application stand out if many students from your school are applying to a specific college? The way is academic achievement, right? Doing really well in your classes, and also the extracurriculars, especially those that give you a separation factor. Is there a preference for SAT or ACT? And the answer is no. How important are SAT subject tests? For the most selective schools, prior years, a lot of them recommended, didn't require, and I'd say recommend means they're important. This year, 1 year in particular, might not be as important, but it will be important for sophomores and freshmen and beyond, potentially, if things get back to normal next year. Are students able to meet their school's territory rep for a given college? The answer is you can meet them in person if they come to your school, or if they go to a college fair in your region, or if they have like a off-campus reception at a hotel. Otherwise, you can actually Google who this rep is on the admission webpage. So let's say you want to Google Middlebury College admission representatives, and it'll show you who the territory rep is for New York, and you can email them and have an e-correspondence. Does Naviance calculate GPA similar for each school or different? We tried to reverse engineer it, and Excel solver failed many times over. So let's talk. If your school does Naviance, which is an online college counseling platform, my school does it, it's amazing. Naviance allows you to have internal data. So that means that the schools will post GPAs based on their own schools. Colleges recalculate GPAs on their own scale. So they might have people who look into what your school's GPA is and weed out phys ed, driver's ed, journalism, art, music, etc. Can I see my high school profile? Great question. Reach out to your school counselor and ask if you can see a profile. It might even be online. Some schools do post it on their high school websites. How are unweighted and weighted GPAs taken into account? Great question. So an unweighted GPA means it's a 4.0 scale. Schools don't give extra points for honors or AP. It's just a standard 4.0 scale. Weighted GPA means a school might be on a 4.5 scale or a 5.0 scale or whatever it is your school does. Colleges tend to look at an unweighted grade point average on the one hand and separately look at the curricular rigor. So a 4.0 without a single AP or honors class is not a 3.8 with all honors and APs. They look at the GPA not in a vacuum, but in the context of what the high school has to offer. Don't colleges take transcripts for 4 years? I thought you said 3 years. The answer is 4 years of schedule, 3 years of final grades, and then depending on when you apply, what they'll look at for senior year. So early decision, early action schools might look at first quarter grades because they can admit you in December without seeing final grades. But any acceptance letter that you get will say this is contingent upon continued high academic achievement. So if you got all A's through 3.5 years, and then you decide which college you want to go to, and then your final transcript has a whole list of C's and D's, get ready for that probation letter or, heaven forbid, that rescind letter. So yes, they look at the final transcript for that one school where you matriculated, but for the admission process, they don't see the final grades. So question privately, I go to a certain school as a vocal major, but want to be a doctor. Can I do anything? Can me being able to sing do anything for my application? And the answer is that it's a wonderful activity that doesn't help for pre-med. Now, pre-med is interesting. You don't have to be pre-med on an application. Pre-med is a track, 1 year biochem, organic chemistry, and physics with a semester of calculus. So don't feel like you have to list pre-med because you could be pre-med in college as an English major. You could be pre-med in college as a biochem major. There's no one major you have to have for pre-med. So don't worry about that factor. Pre-med is not something you have to put in an application. If you do, you don't have to have done all the research in the world, but it doesn't hurt to have some research or to have some hospital volunteerism or some level of match with your pre-med interest. Maybe your school has a science journal or medical journal, things like that. The AP exams that were taken this year looked at differently, and do colleges still give you credit for them? Colleges are still giving credit for them. They are not penalizing juniors because of coronavirus. So if you took APs this year and you got a 4 or a 5, they're not going to say, nah, we don't want to give you credit because it was only 45 minutes. It's not like that. What are typical ways colleges recompute GPA off letter grades? The answer is every school has their own internal system. It tends to be a 4.0 scale is most common, where it's English, history, math, science, foreign language through 3 years on a 4.0 scale for A's, A minus 3.666, B plus 3.333, B 3.0, and down the line. Someone asked about subject tests and competitive schools. Again, if you have them from prior years, great. If not, don't feel bad about it. How important is trend in course difficulty to colleges? Like if you took regular 1 year, then went back to honors. That's a great question. Colleges note the upward trend. So if your grades got better every year, that's huge. Or if your curricular rigor got stronger every year. Now, the most selective schools tend to want highest level curriculum with A's throughout because they can. But there are people who get in without that if they have other compelling stories. Should you take both the SAT and ACT? That's a great question. If you want to figure out which is the right test for you, you might want to do one practice test of each. And if one felt like it was the absolute right match, then proceed with that one test and take that multiple times if need be. But you shouldn't feel like you have to take both because colleges want to see both. What is considered a good score on SAT for most schools, not Ivies? So most schools is a big question, right? There are thousands of schools out there. The national average is a 1026 for SAT. Will there be plenty of schools that accept you with a 1026 or lower? Yes. But that's not going to be a good enough score for some of the schools that have maybe an under 50% admit rate. They'll usually want higher scores. If you received a 1580 SAT score, would you retake if you're looking to apply to Ivy League colleges? No. 1580, you're at the top. You're great. I would say MIT, if you have a 750 math or below, Caltech also, you might want to retake. If you're scoring in the mid 1500s, you're in the game. Doesn't mean you're getting in, just means you're in the game. So 1580, you definitely don't have to retake. Do not feel like you have to have a 1600. 1580 is amazing. Can you take subject tests twice and does it hurt to take it multiple times? You could take it as many times as you want. You do have score choice. You can pick and choose what you want to send to colleges. You can self-report on your applications just the highest scores that you want them to see, and then officially send from the College Board website your highest SATs or SAT subject tests that will help you, or the highest ACTs from the ACT website. Is it better for a current ninth grader to practice for SAT this summer or next summer? I would say as a current ninth grader, it's a little early. It doesn't hurt to know vocabulary, but the math, you're not there yet. You haven't covered the math most likely. That's going to be on the SAT or ACT. So post 10th grade is a better summer to do prep for testing, especially for math. For now, it doesn't hurt to brush up on your reading comprehension and vocabulary. So great question. If you get like a 1250 on the SATs and then a 1540, do colleges still care about the first, and does your second exam matter that you retook? Colleges know that kids go up. They do know that. But I would say don't self-report or show that 1250. It doesn't help you in any way. So only send scores that are going to help out your application. If you have a 1540 with an A average, I think they'll believe the 1250 as the aberration and the 1540 as the real legit score. If you went from a 1250 to a 1540 with all C's, they might think someone else took the test for you. So, you know, it's better not to, it's better only to show the test score. It's going to help you. How should you plan if you are stuck in the middle where you'll not be able to get a lot of financial aid, but to not have enough to pay for tuition? This is a really important question. No college that's cost $75,000 a year is worth your family being in significant debt. This is something you have to think about as a family. If you have multiple kids behind the one that's now applying to schools, for example, you need to think long-term family planning and have that serious conversation with your kids of what is affordable, what is not affordable. An in-state public, like a CUNY or a SUNY, will always be cheaper sticker price than an out-of-state public, like a Maryland, a Rutgers, a Michigan, which will always be cheaper of a sticker price than a private school. Private schools might have more funding to make themselves cheaper than an out-of-state public, but an in-state public, for the most part, will be the cheapest option. Now, you can make any school you go to cheaper if a student, for example, lives in a triple, which is 3 to a room instead of 2. Or if you choose a non-air conditioning dorm, that is usually cheaper as well. And usually September and May are the only months of the year that are actually hot in the Northeast or Midwest. So there are different things you could look at, but if you are in that middle and you're worried about not getting the aid, it's important to have that realistic conversation with your kids. Do your research before on that net price calculator and see what could work for you. Next question. Due to COVID-19, my hospital volunteering was discontinued due to risk. Will they consider that? I have lots of church activities. Does that count? Colleges will know that students had things that were canceled for them that were postponed as a result of COVID. There's no one summer activity you have to do this summer to help out your application, but I would say, think of something that's interesting to you. Have you always wanted to learn a foreign language that you never had the chance to? Have you wanted to pick up an artwork or origami or music, an instrument? This is the time to do that if you don't have anything landed that's very concrete and routinized. Okay, so extracurriculars, what about schools like LaGuardia have a super long schedule plus commute? Do colleges take this into consideration? Yes, they take into consideration the rigor of your school day. Commuting, it's not the same. They're saying that's a choice you made. They still want you to be involved in activities, but they do take into account your school day. That being said, students can still be active on Saturdays or Sundays, on Friday evenings. It shouldn't just be that you're using that as a crutch. They're still looking to see that you're active in your school or greater community. Competitions, if you've been playing piano with commitment since age 5, but don't compete in competitions, does that make piano less valuable as an extracurricular? If you're not a recruited musician, playing an instrument is a nice extracurricular. It's not a hook. It's just something that's nice on an application, just like any other activity. Okay, next. What summer opportunities are still open to high school juniors now? A lot of colleges that had to shut down their in-person summer programs are offering online courses. So you can look up any college of interest and see what online options there are. You can also look up edX. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. But that's like a clearinghouse for online courses. I'm putting it over here. You can also look up Coursera to see if there are any courses you'd want to take. These could be different things that might have interest in terms of taking courses in colleges. Next, yes, Francis, your baby is very cute. That's a great comment. Do colleges interview candidates? Like I said before, a lot of schools do offer them, not all schools. So that's just something to pay attention to on the admission webpage. Francis is recording this. Francis, someone's asking about typing out key points that I'm saying. If you're taking notes, or Francis, you have a recording, that's up to you.
Hi, yeah, we are recording this, okay?
Excellent.
Go ahead.
Next, typing things 2 days before a deadline is a huge mistake. Yes. I can't tell you how important it is to front load this process. So that means that anything that's due 2 days before, you should have already submitted 3 days before that. I make my kids in my school submit a week before. Why? Because tech glitches inevitably arise every year. I don't know if you remember Superstorm Sandy. That hit October 30th of 2012 with a November 1st deadline, and power was wiped out for a few weeks. In 2013, a year later, the Common App just totally crashed days leading up. That's what created the Coalition app as a competitor. So you never know what's going to hit, so don't be part of that population that tries to submit the day of and their computers crash. It happens every year where web traffic is terrible. Common App is literally like a mom and pop shop with 2 people working on IT. So you don't want to submit the day of for any application. Is it okay to ask for a rec letter from a teacher, from someone who's not a teacher, but a debate coach or a club advisor? That should not replace your in-classroom teacher. So you have 2 teachers in classroom. And then if you have 1 supplemental letter you want to add on, that's okay, but shouldn't replace the 2 teachers. Okay, great question I have here privately. Will a rec letter from a Cornell alumni have weight applying? No, because it's not the Cornell alum who's applying. So sometimes I have students say, oh, I want to ask this teacher because I'm applying to Columbia and she went there. I go, they don't care. It doesn't add weight to the letter that she went to Columbia. You're the one applying. Do all applicants land an interview? It's a great question. If you're applying to a college where the college reaches out to you to be interviewed, they don't give it to everyone. Don't construe that as a negative sign, and don't construe getting that email as a definite shoe-in. It's just sometimes the luck of the draw who they'll reach out to. Okay, great question from a parent. Any value in doing alumni interviews to the school that parents went to help kids' applications? Yes, but doing it just the year that your son or daughter is applying isn't going to happen. It's got to be a few years of a parent doing alumni interviews to be helpful for their own kids. Great question. My student has the grades and scores for his school list, but he's very shy. Should he skip interviews? This is such an important question. At some point in life, all of your children need to be strong interviewers. They do, right? They have to land it for graduate school or for jobs one day. My advice is practice now so that at 17, 18, they have those skills and the confidence to be a strong interviewer. Like in the school where I work, we do mock interviews with students. I'm guessing your schools might also. The idea is that anyone could prepare for the types of questions that will be asked in an interview to make themselves feel like they're more self-confident and stronger. Even if you're shy, that's okay, as long as you're able to speak up about the things that are important to you. That's a great question. Does having a 529 plan affect obtainment of scholarships negatively? No, it does not. It's a good question. Do students take both SAT, ACT? I answered before. Does an IB student, this is a good question, need to take AP or SAT exams? AP, no, because you don't have that curriculum tied to it necessarily. But SAT or ACT has nothing to do with IB. SAT, ACT is required standardized testing for most colleges. IB is separate that some high schools offer, not all high schools have that. Does it help to reach out to your admissions rep with questions? Does that help show your interest? The answer is yes, as long as the student that's reaching out, not the parents, and the student has a question that's something that maybe they couldn't gauge from the website. So you don't want to ask a question that would be front page on the website. Like, don't email a rep, what city is your campus located in? That's not a good question. But something that's a little bit more penetrating, that you've done research in the school and you want to learn more, is a better question. So something having to do with the nuances of housing on campus or club life on campus, or something to do with academics, but not something that's very basic that's right there on the front page of the website. Do you have to show your colleges your AP scores? Do you have to send colleges your SAT subject test scores? You can self-report your AP scores. I would only self-report a 4 or a 5 for most schools. There are a number of schools that will take 3, and for those you could self-report. I would not self-report a 1 or a 2. You don't have to send AP scores to colleges from the College Board website and pay that fee. That is something you could do upon graduation once you know where you're going and submit to that one school. Subject tests also, you have score choice. How impactful are honors classes? Very impactful. For the more competitive schools, they're expecting the most robust curriculum possible. What's the max time somebody should take SAT? Great question. For the most part, after 3 times, maybe 4, test scores don't go up that much. So I'm not saying that that's never been the case. I once had a student take it 8 times, and from 7th to the 8th, she went from a 1280 to a 1400. That's not the norm. Most kids, after a few times, unless they all of a sudden study extremely hard and they didn't study the first few times, usually there's more consistency in the scores after a few times. But there's no max number that schools are seeing. Does it matter which grade you took the SAT or ACT? Is it okay to take it right before or after freshman year? My guess is you won't get your highest scores before or after freshman year because you haven't covered the math necessarily. If you've taken it after freshman year and you got a 35, you're done. Kudos to you. I've had kids do that at the end of sophomore year, never end of freshman year though. Okay, if you got a low 700 on a bio SAT subject test but want to major in business, should you still send the score? So 700s, I'd say usually are the scores you can send. Business, still looking at math 2, more so than biology. So math 2 at a more competitive college in the mid 700s would be ideal. What if your score went down by 40 points, but super scored went up by 50 points? Great question. Colleges are super scoring the SATs. A lot of schools are super scoring the ACTs, not all of them. So let's say your March SAT was a 500 evidence-based reading and writing and 700 math, just to make up some numbers. And in August, you get a 600 evidence-based reading and writing, but a 600 math. So you went up 100 points in one, but you went down 100 points in the other. You would still send both months. But my advice to students is, let's say you hit a 750 on a subject, on a sub score. If it goes down a little bit, that's okay. Don't let it go down precipitously because you put your head down because you got lazy. Don't let them think that the higher score was the aberration. You want them to think that higher score is the reality. Do you need to report all your SAT, ACT attempts? No. Some colleges will say, send us everything. It'll help out your application. No, you don't have to. You have score choice. You can choose what you want to send. Do scholarships decrease with each year at college? This is a great question. If you get scholarships, very often they're renewable all 4 years, but you have to read the literature. It might say, this is a $10,000 freshman year scholarship. That tells you it's only for freshman year. What you want it to say is, this is a $10,000 annual scholarship for your 4 years of college. Colleges also will have you do a FAFSA every year, because if the cost of the education goes up, and let's say family income went down, they'll want to adjust to give you more money. Because again, they want to retain students. They don't want you transferring out. Can I summarize what a hook is? A hook is any type of edge that you have based on some type of background that you have that gives you an edge in admission, whether that's legacy, being an underrepresented population of some kind, being a development case. That's what I mentioned. If you're a Kennedy and you could pay for a library, if you're a recruited athlete or recruited musician, if you're applying for an underrepresented major and you have the credentials to match that major, those are examples of hooks. Is there a good number of total APs you should take? It depends on the school. The school where I work, the maximum is 4, so nobody could take more than 4. So if someone's applying for the most selective schools, only having taken 1 or 2, they're not going to get in. If your school offers 20, taking 20 is a little bit much. So speak to your school counselor to see what the number is that makes sense for students getting into top schools from your school. Okay, should you put on your transcript that you participate in school events that they hosted, such as greeting upcoming 9th graders and showing them around? So like if you're a student ambassador, you're a representative for the school, that's great. You don't want to list anything that you only did one time in freshman year or one time in sophomore year. It's really the multi-year, multiple hours a week commitment that they're looking at. Do schools know your expected family contribution? That is only if you filled out the financial aid papers. Most schools are either need blind or need sensitive. There are some schools that will look at need in regular decision or in the waitlist pool. They do pay attention to it, especially schools without stronger endowments. But a lot of schools are need blind, especially the most selective research universities. Okay, so I got a question privately. What are best organizations to coordinate with to make changes in the community? That's the research for you to do based on your interests. So for example, I can't tell you what your hook is going to be because I don't know you. But if you are an amazing cellist and you want to teach cello to people that don't have access to purchasing cellos, Google it, look around to see what there is in your community. Or if you are someone who wants to teach a certain sport in a certain area, or if you're someone who wants to, I had a student who read to children in homeless shelters. There are a lot of things that you could do out there to help out in your community. It's a matter of thinking what you're passionate about and then doing research on what's out there for you. Guess we are a bit past 8:30. Francis, tell me when you want me to stop.
How about like 5 more minutes? And everyone, let's say thank you into the chat box, okay? Say thank you. Oh, my daughter's very good at thank yous. Come, Michelle. She's been trained. She's done a couple of these webinars. Come, Michelle. You want to start? Let's start saying thank you.
So sweet.
I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Actually, I'll give her a moment to say. Wait. Say thank you to everyone. Say
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. And I
Thank
like
you.
how you listening. Thank you. Have a great day.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah, you guys can go off mute. Let's start saying thank you because we got to wind down toward 8:30. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, you're very welcome.
We made it work, guys. Never say we didn't make it work. We made it happen.
I
Florida.
like how you stay still, and I like how you listening. I love you. I hope you have a great day.
Oh, she's so precious.
Thank you, guys. So let's start. Yeah, let's wind down and let's just maybe get some closing remarks. And I get, if it's possible, just to kind of address an idea or two, you know, in light of what's going on with coronavirus and quarantine and, oh, I don't even know where to begin with just the news and the media. Maybe if you can give just a short overview of kind of what you think they can do to empower and how to kind of make a positive contribution in light of so much going on right now in recent events.
So I think it's interesting because a lot of students had summer programs they're hoping to do or their plans were totally altered. Nobody should be sitting down, twiddling their thumbs, staring at an iPad all day for a whole summer. That shouldn't be happening. Now, you are definitely welcome to downtime, and you've earned it after a year like this. But there are ways to make a dent in your community, whether it's contacting the local nursing home and seeing if you could Zoom in with senior citizens who are lonely, or if you're able to go to a food pantry and help deliver items, or bake goods for certain essential workers in hospitals. There are things you can do to make an impact on communities. Don't just think it's for a college resume, but also it's good to be a good citizen. I would say online courses could be something to think about. There are a lot of free ones out there, or maybe getting a certificate of some kind. I have a student who just got his real estate license, an 18-year-old. He's like, why not? This is the time. So he did that exam this past spring. So that could be something to think about. If there's some course you've always wanted to take and your high school offers traditional English, history, math, science, foreign language, but here you are, you could take a film course this summer. That could be fun for you to do. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Don't let the college process overwhelm you and take over your entire lives. Parents, every conversation at the dinner table should not be about college admission, because the kids need that separation, they need that space. I always say parents are the cheerleaders in the process. So it's almost like you're always wishing them good, but your sons and daughters are in the driver's seat. They are the ones who are doing the applications, who are doing a lot of the research, and you are their sidekick cheering them along. So it's almost like you're coaching them through this process and not owning the process. If you're someone who's worked hard in school and you're engaged in some activities, you're going to find colleges that are going to want you. So it's just a matter of being open-minded. Don't think, if I don't go to an Ivy League school, my life is over. Promise it's not. The most important degree you're going to have is your terminal degree, whether it's a master's, whether it's a medical or a law or PhD. That brand name matters more than your undergrad. I would say undergrad matters the most if you know for sure you want to go right into Wall Street. They do recruit based on brand name very often. But still, wherever you go, you can still get a great job on Wall Street if you have internships and you've made connections and you've done really well academically. That's still a strong possibility. So Francis, that's my closing.
So I want to say thank you again. You guys were a great audience, and at peak we had 120 participants. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you got a lot out of this. It's cute. Let's, as you guys are exiting out, you can either type or you can unmute yourself. Can I unmute all of us? Can we do a group? Thank you. Nope, I can't unmute everyone. Zoom 5.0 did not give me that privilege anymore. So we just want to all say thank you. So we're unmuting little by little.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was
so
really
much.
informative.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks for
you. This
hosting
was
this
awesome.
while you were in Florida and still making time for this.
Thank you.
Can we get a
Thank you.
copy of
Thank
this
you so
recording?
much. Okay, we got a lot out of it. Thanks again. Okay, everyone. So that's it. We're going to close up. Wish me luck figuring out how to do this. Okay. Thank you guys. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
So I've been looking at the email, so this is the only one that. Right.